Building relationships is hard, and it's especially hard as an adult when you're no longer in school and all those other things, because how do you meet people, how do you build that connection, and these are things that I think adults and older teens start to struggle with, regardless of whether or not they've experienced any sort of emotional or mental difficulty in their life. But what happens when you have experienced a significant trauma or a series of significant traumas in your life and you want to try to build relationships? Well, that's what this video is about today. I'm Kim Long and I'm with Dr. Psychological Services in Spruce Grove, Alberta, and as always, these videos are just meant to be an educational resource for you. They don't constitute any therapy and they just represent my experience and my opinion, so take from it what you can. Okay, so as a practitioner that works with complex PTSD quite a bit, there are certain things that I notice and that we look for as part of our diagnostic manual. But basically, to break it down into an easily digestible format, trauma affects your thoughts, your way of viewing the world, your belief system, your feelings, and your behaviors as a result. And so because it kind of impacts the entire system, I think you could probably guess that's going to have a significant impact on relationships. But what are you looking for yourself as someone that is moving forward in relationships after experiencing trauma, or as somebody who has a partner who has experienced trauma? Some of the things that you might see or hear, because really you're going to hear it in what they say or in what you say or how you're acting. Some people that have experienced trauma, they notice their memory kind of sucks. And that's because after a trauma, especially if you stay in a really heightened kind of state and you can't get yourself out of it, and by heightened I mean like either really low, like numb, or really elevated, like anxious and angry and all of those things. If you're in either one of those two areas of functioning, your frontal lobe, which helps you make decisions, which helps you remember things and recall story, it doesn't work very well. So, that's a double whammy, right? Because you are not only going to have issues with memory, but you're going to have issues with making decisions. So if somebody asks you, hey, where do you want to go for dinner? Your knee-jerk response might be almost a freeze response of, I don't know. Or an angry response if you don't get your way, because part of it is wanting to feel like you're in control, wanting to feel like you're empowered somehow. So there's a lot of layers as to why the behaviors show up the way they do, but really it comes down to that thinking part of your brain, that management part of your brain just isn't working very well. It's not an excuse to be a jerk though. Let's be clear, this is just information, it's not permission. So yes, memory issues, other behaviors you might notice, other than an inability to make decisions or a struggle with that, the person might avoid going out and doing things because the world is no longer safe, which brings us into the thinking. It's a struggle for many people who have experienced trauma, particularly complex trauma, it's really difficult to trust themselves, trust others, or trust the world that they live in. And so as a partner, you might be wondering, well, why doesn't he or she trust me? It really has nothing to do with you, which I know feels very strange. It has to do with how the world is now, it's like they've taken off glasses they used to wear, or they're putting on glasses that they've never worn before, and just the world is completely different. And so it breeds a certain amount of distrust because they no longer trust themselves. They no longer trust the world that they live in to keep them safe and that they can function in that world in an empowered way. So you'll notice a lot of negative self-talk, either about situations or about themselves. And no matter what you do as a partner to try to convince them otherwise, and no matter what you do as a person to try to convince yourself otherwise, it's sometimes very difficult to shift out of that negative mindset, which then leads to feelings, or the feelings come first. There's a huge debate about that still. I know what I think, but that doesn't really matter for the purposes of this video. With feelings, you'll often notice that either you or your partner feels really down or low a lot, or feels really angry or anxious a lot. There's hypervigilance, which is like the looking over your shoulder and just waiting for the other shoe to drop, even if there's no evidence that that will happen. This has nothing to do with logic. It has everything to do with the reflexive system and the emotional system saying, oh my God, there's a constant threat now. So don't even try to have it make sense. It will not make sense from a logical perspective, except if you look at it sciencey, and that doesn't really make you feel any better. But you'll really struggle to feel kind of any amount of excitement for any period of time, happiness, love, peace, calmness, a feeling of being grounded. All of those things become difficult. And I would imagine I get a really clear picture in my head of what a relationship would look like with those kinds of emotions and emotional reactions being involved. There is, and we often talk about the anger or the anxiety, and not so much about the lows, but numbness is really, really common. A lack of interest in anything. And that can be really disheartening when you're trying to be in a relationship. So all of those things, this is like a brain dump of all different ways that trauma can affect relationships. The thing to try to remember, both as the partner and as the person struggling with trying to be in the relationship, is the system is trying to take care of itself. So even though from a logical perspective, we're looking around and there's no threats, the system still perceives a threat because it's unresolved for the person, because they felt helpless in that moment, and we don't like that. So our system's trying to resolve that. So long story short, way too late. It's about the body and the system actually responding in a way that is appropriate in a different context. So, what does this mean for you in relationship? Well, I think I'm going to have to make a different video for how to help yourself if you are the person struggling with it. And some of those strategies will be for, or helpful for, the person who is the partner in that situation. But in the meantime, I'd really like you to try to take away that if you have experienced a significant trauma that left you feeling helpless, or a series of those leading to complex trauma, and you're noticing that your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior are so different and it makes it difficult to be in relationship, you are not broken. Okay, try to remember that your system is trying to cope with something that is brand new, that it wasn't resourced for. So there are ways to be able to re-engage in healthy relationships. It's just a matter of figuring out which ones will work for you. So we'll get to that. Okay, in the meantime, please take care of yourself. And as always, if you have any questions, please let us know. And yeah, bye for now.